Mehei Amid Aleph on the bottom. The fourth line, at the end of the fourth line, it says Omar Abaya. We learned those few words, but the next piece of Gemara is a connection to that. So, Mehei Amid Aleph.
Fourth line from the bottom.
Zitma Amar Abaya. Abaya said, Hareini ki ben Azai b'shuka Tveria. I am like Ben Azai in the streets of Tveria. I said the last time already that Ben Azai would told the people that you could ask me questions, like Stump the Rabbi. They have a program, so you could ask me questions. So he says, I'm like Ben Azai, you have a question, now's the chance to ask me a question. So there was a Talmud over there, and he said to Abaya, Shnei chaloim zeh al gav zeh. If there are two cups, one is laying on top of the other, Meheichen hu moeded. From where do you start to measure to the closest city? The question is what this is. Do we say min b'minai havi taman? That min b'mina means they're both the same actually. So still, it's considered like two separate entities. Like there's a lower one and an upper one. If you say that min b'mina havi taman, or min b'minai lights off, and it's not considered that one is like floating up in the air. They're because they're both one. So Melis you measure from the top one, because the two of them are really one, like one very thick one. A dilma, or maybe, or perhaps, min b'minai havitzof, that when one is laying on top of the other, so the upper one is considered floating in the air. Umin b'minai lei havi taman, it's not considered taman because it's considered like one. B'meila, if that's the case, umitachten moeded, you measure from the top one because they're all one. A dilma, or maybe min b'minai havi taman. It's considered taman. The Mela say you can't measure from the bottom one because the bottom one is taman. Min b'mina havi tzof, and the Mela say you can't measure from the top one. That was the question that the person asked them. That's the Gemara. Tanitua, we learned a brisa to solve this question. If someone had a bundle that he took it, he prepared it to take it to the city. But he put it on top of another bundle, and he forgot about it. So steht to say, hatachtain is shikha. The bottom one is shikha. V'elyon ain't a shikha. So why is the tachta shikha? Because it's not considered taman. It's min b'mina, right? And the elyon is not shikha because it's soft. It's floating. If Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Mishum Reb Shimon, Shneim Einim Shikha. They're both not shikha. Why not? Hatachtem Neshu Taman, V'Elyon Neshu Tzof. So Savrua, the Racham, when they saw this brisa, they thought the Hani Tanoi, that these two Tanoim that we argue over here, in this case of shikha, Kirab Yehuda Svida Lahu. They hold like Rabbi Yehuda, the Amma Basada Prat Taman. The Taman is part. So I would say, what is their machlokes? So my Rabbi Hoka Mifagid. The Masava min b'minai havi tamim. Therefore, the bottom one is tamim. Umasava lo havi tamim. And one holds that the bottom one is not tamim. So it got nothing to do over here with the question about min b'minai. That's not the question. If they hold like Rabbi Yehuda, if we say that both of them go to Rabbi Yehuda, that Tamun is Potter, the Kula Alma min b'minai havi tamim. Everybody will agree that min b'minai is tamim. If min b'minai is tamim, so then the bottom one doesn't have to. Is not shikha. It's tamim. Over here they're arguing in what's the din b'negeh to tamim. The Rabbanon, that means the Tanakama that said before that the Tachton is shikha and the Elin is not shikha, is he holds like the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon hold that Taman is also chayiv. Kushtei pasada, so it's ma'aber Taman. Reb Shimon bar Yehuda ki Rabbi Yehuda, and Reb Shimon bar Yehuda holds like Rabbi Yehuda that Taman is pater. So the whole argument over here is not anything to do with min b'minai, but we want to know if Taman is chayiv or Taman is pater. So the Gemara, if you're saying it has nothing to do with the question of min b'minai, so why do you got to tell us a story that there's two same bundles, one on top of the other? If you're saying that, so it means that the shayla, it depends if min b'minai. But if you're saying it has nothing to do with min b'minai, so why does he tell you that the two bundles one on another? Afilu ba'ofer u'b'tzrar nami. Even if one bundle is lying and it's covered with a stone, not min b'minai. And you want to know if the bundle that's under the stone, it has a dinner. Is it according to Taman that Taman is potter or Taman is chayiv? And for the Gemara, it says, you're right. He doesn't have to say it in such a way. He could have said it even if it's covered with stone or something else. But he wants us to hear the Chiddush of Yehuda, the Amar that he says, Afilu min b'minai havi tamen. The Afilu min b'minai is also considered tamen, and the question over here is if tamen is chayiv or tamen is potter. Okay, that finishes this inyan. Now we go back to the Ega Rufa, the dead body. Zegt the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, Cholo, steht in Pasuk Cholo. Now what does Cholo mean? Cholo means someone that was killed with a piece of steel. That's called the Cholo. So he says, V'loi Chanuk. If somebody was choked, he wasn't still. He was still with a rope around his neck. And Cholo v'loi mefaper. Cholo means that he's dead, and not that he's like shaking yet. He's like a goisus. Ba'adamo v'loi tamen begal. He has to be exposed on the ground and not here in a heap of stones. Then it steht neufel v'loi tohu be'ilun. Basada v'loi tzof up in air mine. So we exclude all these from the Pasha of Ega Rufa. If you find such a corpse that it indicates one of these things, the Ega Rufa Pasha doesn't apply over here. Zot the Gemara, Rabbi Lezer says, the Kulan, all these cases that were mentioned before, Im ha'yacholo orphan. In other words, if you see someone hanging, and it's obvious that he was killed by a piece of steel, so it's a case of Ega Rufa. Anything what we excluded before, all the one that we excluded before, he says, I don't exclude him. It depends. If it was killed with a steel, any position is chayiv. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rabbi Lezer, said to Rabbi Lezer, Iyata Maida, don't you admit, Shem Hoya Chonak, Umuchu Ba'ashpa, She'ein Arfim, that if he was choked and he's laying in a dump, so there's no Egarufa, Alma Cholo V'loi Chanuk. So you see that you hold that Cholo, but not Chanuk, right? If that's the case, Hakinami, say Ba'adama V'loi Tamim, Begal Neifel V'loi Talu, Be'ilan V'sotah V'loi Tzav, Agabi V'loi Tzav, Agabi Mayim. In other words, being that you hold that Chanuk, you agree Chanuk is Potter, so why don't you agree also that all those others are Potter? And for the Gemara, Zok the Gemara, Rabbi Lezer says, Chol Yisayda Kesiva. It says an extra time Chol in the Pasha of Egarufa, but Mela said indicates that only if it's a Chol. So if it's Chanuk and Munach Ba'ashpa, it wasn't killed with steel. So then that doesn't apply. But if, let's say, it's someone that was killed with steel and he's laying Ba'ashpa, he's laying even a Tamun, it still applies to Pasha Egarufa. Then the Gemara says, Nimtza Samach Asfar, if it was found near the border of Eretz Yisrael, or near next to a Goyish city, so the din, you don't do the process of Egaruva. What's the reason? The Ksiva Shetin Posek, Ki Yimotzei, Prato Motzei. Ki Yimotzei means that it's something unusual. Ki I'm about Gefinin, it's not unusual, but if it's a city with Goyim are murderers, so it's no Chiddush. I mean, if you find someone over there. Then it says, over here, She'ein Bo Bezdin, why? If there's no Bezdin, so there's no elder Choshev Yidden there. So we do. Then it says, after that it says in the Mishnah, Ein Moedin and Elu Sheyesh Bo Bezdin. Why do you have to tell us this part? Pshita, Kivan the Tani Shein Bo Bezdin, being that it says already that you don't measure to a city where there's no Bezdin, Ano Yedana, the Ein Moedin, Eliyah Sheyesh Bo Bezdin. If it says you don't measure to a city where there's no Bezdin, so you understand from that what? That if there's a Bezdin, you do measure. So why does the Mishnah have to say that we measure to a city where there's a Bezdin? And for the Gemara, Hakam Ashmon, Kedesanya, Minayin Shem Nitzah Samach Le'eh Shein Bo Bezdin, Shem Anichan Oiso Moedin Le'eh Sheyesh Bo Bezdin, Talmud Reima, V'Rabko Zik Ne'eh, Ahi Mikol Mokum. That means that if the Mishnah didn't repeat it, so we would think if the closest city is a city that has no Bezdin, we would think that you don't measure at all. Finish, it's exempt. So he says no, that you don't measure, not that you don't measure at all, but then you have to measure to the next city where there is a Bezdin. Even if you found the mess near city A, and city A has no Bezdin, that doesn't mean to say that there's no Egg Harufa. No, you go to city B. And if it wouldn't say that you measure from a city that there is a Bezdin, you would think that if the city A has no Bezdin, it's all potter. That's why he repeats it.
But what's the use of measuring if it's so close to city A? There's no Bezdin, so for sure it can't compare.
Huh?
What's the use of measuring to city B?
No, so the people from city B have to bring that Garufa.
They're responsible for that because they found next to city A. It's so close to A.
But
Good,
no
but there's no Bezdin there. So it doesn't mean to say that Egarufa doesn't apply. Egarufa applies, and you go to the next city, and the next city will bring that Egarufa. Okay, let's see the Mishnah. Nimsa Mechluva Meshtei Ayores, if they measured, and it's exactly between two cities, exactly. is a din shteyem meviyas shtey agoris. Each one has to bring an agarufa. Divrei Rabbi Bogomilsky. Ve'ein nachadin, ve'ein Yerushalayim meviyah agarufa. If, when you measure, and it's next to Yerushalayim, so Yerushalayim doesn't bring an agarufa. The Gemara will explain why that is. Nimsa Raisha b'makam echad v'gufa b'makam echad. If he was the cap and his head is separated from his body, so from where do you measure? So one opinion says, Malichan haraish eitzel aguf. We bring the head to the body and you measure from over there. Divrei Rabbi Bogomilsky. Rabbi Kiva Aimer, the opposite. That aguf eitzel haraish. You bring the body to the head. Why? The Gemara will explain so. When you measure, so from what part of the body do you measure? Rabbi Eliezer, mitibura. Tibura is the navel. We call it pupik. Rabbi Kiva, michaytma, from the nose. That's where the breathing is. And Rabbi Eliezer, Yaakov, mimokam shenasa cholo, shetach cholam. Cholam means that he was killed with a sword. Where is that? Mitzavari, from the neck, from the throat. That's the Gemara. My time, but the Rabbi Eliezer, what's the time that said that if it's close to two cities, each city brings a negarufim. So the Gemara, he holds efshalat samson. It could be exact. There is such a thing as mamish exact. And ukraiva, I feel a kraivais. The said that the kraiva means, doesn't mean dafku one, that could be two that are karib. The ein Yisrael mevi agarufa, the amakra v'rishta. He said, "Ki motzach b'dama, which I give you v'rishta, which I'm giving you to inherit." And Kasavei holds Yisraelim wein deschalka u'shvatim. No shevet got Yisraelim. It was like a public area for everybody. Nimsa reisha b'makam echad. So we have a machlekes if you take the rosh to the body or the body to the rosh. So the mother Micah Mifugim. What are they arguing? If you think that the argument going to get to do you go to the head to measure or do you go to the body to measure? So the mother Mida can say ein hayamadim mikral the reisha rabbi medida skinen. The next piece of Mishnah said, from where do you measure? Is assuming that this part has nothing to do with measuring. It's a different question. Amar Rav Yechanan, Amar Rav Yitzchak, the meis mitzvah kaina mekayme kamifagim. There is a din when Yeshua divided Eretz Yisrael when they came into Eretz Yisrael. So Yeshua made up with the Yidden that a meis mitzvah, even regardless where the meis mitzvah is, but wherever he is, he's kind of mekayme, you can bury him over there. Like no one can say, well, he's not from my shevet, why should I bury him in my land? A meis mitzvah is kind of mekayme. So, v'hachei ka'ama, and this is what the Mishnah means, l'kayvrei kana mekayme, regarding to bury the cholo, he's kind of his place. The place where you found him. Of a hechad in nimsa reishai b'makam echad, v'gufa b'makam echad. So what do? Maglichan haraish eitzel haguf. That's what the Rabbi Eliezer says. But Rabbi Kiva Aimer haguf eitzel haraish.
That's where they bury him.
Yeah, and that's where they bury. In fact, the Gemara b'maikam efugim. What is their machlekes about? That the Gemara says, Masava. The one that says, one holds, Gufay beduchtei nafel. In other words, when they got killed, his body landed on the spot where he got, that's the spot where he got killed. And Reishai, the nodded v'nafel, and the head rolled. Remember, so the head is separate from the body, but really, where we killed, where his body is, that's where he was killed. Umasava, and one holds Reisha Heichad Nafal Nafal. The head, when they cut his throat and the head fell off, so that's where he died. But there was still life. A Gufa hold that a heart as in other words, he ran without a head. There was still life in the body. So so really, but that's not, it was like it was a dead person that was running. So you go, so you want to know where to bury him. You look where the head is, but that's where he was killed. So we learned in the Mishnah, if you measure from the tiburai, or you measure from chaytmai, or you measure from the throat, what's the mechayk? That to say, Masava, one holds ika chayusa be'ape, that the main chayas is breathing, and you breathe through your nose. Umasava ika chayusa be'tiburei, that the food gets digested, gets distributed through that part of the body. So the Gemara, should we say that this is the same as another machlokes that we have? That this type of machlokes over here is the same as a different. What's the other machlokes? We learn Mahechen Havrad Nitnaisa. When an embryo is created into a child, from where does it start? Where's the first point that begins to develop? So one says Meirashai, one says from the head. V'cheinu oima mimeya ime ata goizi v'oima nizi nizorecha v'hashricheni. So you see, we're talking about a nose and the hair. So the hair has to do with the head. From the navel, and from the navel there's roots that are going through the body, but that's the food, sends the food to the body. So Uchaira is mashma that it's the same machlokes like we have over here. So the Gemara no. Afilatayma Abishol, if you say that they all hold like Abishol, of Atkan, Abishol El Yitzira. We have a show's din is where creation of the child began. The chi mitzvah vlad mimtziyisa mitzvah. When a vlad is formed from the midpoint, and from the midpoint it spreads out to the lower point and to the upper point. But when they get to life point, is the kul alma me'apit. Everyone, it could be over there. Everyone will hold. So it's not raya that this machlokes has anything to do with the machlokes from where a vlad is created. Why do everyone agree that it's ba'apeh is from the nose? Because the ksiv kol asher nishes u'achayim ba'apov, that the spirit of life in the nostrils. And the Belezer ben Yaakov mimokum shenasa chol, which is mitzavarei, my Talmud that Belezer ben Yaakov, because the ksiv lo says oischa el tzavari cholei rishayim. So we see that those killed rishayim is from tzavari. Tzavari is the neck. Now we go to the next mission. Niftaru zikna Yishalayim v'hochel lehem. First, it came shed v'yotzel zikanecho shetecha. He said, okay, they come out, and then it said they leave. And what happens when they leave? Ziknei oiseh ha'ir. There's a came from the city. Meivim ego boka. Asher moshcha ba'ol that never worked. Ve'ein amum paisel bo, a mum, it doesn't matter if it's a mum, by para aduma steht, para aduma tmina shein bo mum, but the ego is even has a mum is good. Umayriden oisol v'nachal eison, eison kimashmoy, kosher. That means it's a hard piece of land, it's a stony piece of land. But the din is, it's also kosher. If you have a stream nearby and it's not a hard piece of land, it's also kosher. You take a big knife and like what they call a masechtas, like that's a big knife, and you chop it, the back, shchita, that's from the throat, you chop the head. And that place where they made this egaruf process, you're not allowed to plant over there. But you're allowed to comb flax over there. And clean stones that you're allowed to. Zikne oiseh chaitzes es yedayim b'mayim b'mokem arifa shel egar. They wash their hands over there with water that's poured over the place where they chop the head off the egar. V'ayim, they say yodeinu l'shavchas adam hazeh v'neinu l'ro. In fact, the Mishnah also shazikne bezen shevra damhein. Why do we tell them to say such a thing? Are they suspected of killing him? And for the Gemara, that means to say, Ella shalei ba al yadeinu. We never met this person. Upatenu b'loi mazon, and we met him and we never gave him food. That never happened. B'loi re'inu and we didn't see him, and that we saw. If we saw and we didn't accompany him when he left, so then we were at fault. But we never saw. And the Kainim say, Kapel Ampri Saw Shepodisa Hashem, Vatitan Dam Naki Bekerev Ampri Saw. Now, Loiha Yitzchik Loima Vini Kapel Lehem Adam, that they didn't have to say. El Ruach HaKodesh Mevasrasam, they heard a heavenly voice that Amos Ashatasu Kocha is Adam is Kapel Lehem. Well, you'll do the process of the Agarufa, so the blood will forgive you that you're not blamed for killing this person. In fact, the Gemara, we said that if it has a mum, it's kosher. That's what we said in the Mishnah. In fact, the Gemara, v'yehei mum paisel be'ego mikal v'chayma v'chayra, a mum should not be good. How do we know that? We can make a kavachayim from the paraduma. What's the kavachayim? Uma para she'ein hashon paisos. A para is an aged animal. It makes no difference how old it is. But if it's a red cow, it's good. In fun deswegen, mum paisabo. By a paraduma, if it has a mum, it's puzzle. So b'zei ego sheshon paisos bo ein adin she'ei mum paisabo. It's about the good. We see that the egla is more chomer than the para. So if it's more chomer, you see, it has to be a young one. So if it's more chomer than the para, so say that a mum shepasel also. So the Gemara, shani hasam, even though you have a kavachayma, but there's a pasuk. The Amakra asher ein bo mum by paraduma shet asher ein bo mum. So we say mum paisel ve'ein mum paisel be'egla. In fact, the Gemara, if you're making this kavachayma from para, that you learn one from the other. In other words, in the pasuk state, by Ega Rupa state, Asher ubad bo. That means that it didn't work with it. But Paraduma state, Asher ola. So ubad bo is more than all. All is just one thing. Ubad bo means any work. So why don't you learn from Ega that by para is possible if ubad bo, not only if all. Alam Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Hiniach Oira Shosakin Pesula. That's if you put they have like bags that they make from material, sacks, and the Moshe, let's say someone has a few sacks tied together, so that's called Oira Shosakin, a bunch of bags. So we learned as follows: that inicha Eirish Sakin is pesula, ube'ego is not ad shetimshach. By ego, it has to be moving with it. If you put on and it's standing, that's one thing. And if you move on, if you put on and it's moving with it. Because when it's moving with that, then that's that's like a real avodah. That's really working. So the Gemara is asking that if you learn compare one with the other, then we should have learned from Eglah that but para is also possible if you worked with it. And for the Gemara, Shani para is different. You're right that L'chayr is a Kavachayim and everything, but from Deswegen, para is different. The Afinan all me'egro. That we learn by the state all. So b'meila all only all and not anything else. In fact, the Gemara, ego nami teise all mipara. So why don't you learn out from para that it's not possible if you worked with it? And for the Gemara, amid achmona ba, sheit ashaloi ubad ba. So b'meila so is ba and not be'egla. In fact, the Gemara be'egla namik siv ba. So the Gemara, we need a l'memyute kachim. The way possible b'hu avoida. That in kachim, by an egla avoida passes, but by kachim avoida doesn't pass. What's the chiddush? Saka that I would think leisa b'kavachayim egla. We should make a kavachayim. How's the kavachayim? Uma egla sheim mum paisel bo. Avoida paisel is bo. Kachim she mum paisel is b'hem. Ein adin she avoida paisel is b'hem. So that's what I would think. So the Gemara, you can't think that way. Ikul mirful, we can't upfrag this kavachayim. Male egla. Why is egla chamor? Shekain shonim paisel is bo. In fact, the Gemara. What kind of pig is that? Other kachim mi leka the mifsroi shonim. Don't we have also kabbanas that have to be a certain age? And for the Gemara, ki itzakra, we need the pasuk hana kachim the pasuk b'hu shonim. So inachinam taka there are kachim that shonim doesn't pasuk, but there are kachim that shonim does pasel, and those that shonim pasel, so we would say it's the same as an egla, and it should be pasel if you worked with it. Zok the Gemara, v'kodshim d'loi pasel b'avoida mehachanavka. Is the source from where we know that by Kachim, Avodah does not passel. Is this the source, the way you're telling me? Mehosam nafka, we're learning it from something else. It's certain pasuk, Iveres, or Shav, or Charus, or Yabeles, or Gorav, or Yalefes, or Shakriva, Ewa, Iatamakiv. Avatamakiv, Kachin Shenasa Behem, Avodah. That the Gemara, we still need the limit from Porah. Sakadat Chamina Hanim Milhecha, the Avodah Avodah Seta. Avodah Sisa, a Melitzri. Avodah Sisa means that they worked on Shabbos. It says Avodah Sisa. So Tzricha, so for that we need to have the Raya from Iveres or Shavar, the way the Gemara said before. In fact, the Gemara B'Hanami Mehacha Nafka, that Avodah Issa doesn't passel, we know it from something else. Shaitan pasuk miyad ben necha, loisakrivu eslachem elokecha mikol eila. So we say eila iyad demakev, avat demakev kachim shenevda b'em avodah. And this is a film. If we're talking about it's from a guy, so it could be a film avodah sissa, and still you could be makev. And for the Gemara, it's a Sakadai Chamina Hani Mila Hechad Avid Bem Kishain Chulin. That's when it doesn't pass. Avo Avid Bem Kishain Kachim, Ein Melitzeri. But maybe then it should be also because it was already Kachim married. So Tzricha, they say you need the special limud that it doesn't ask. Now the Gemara is going to repeat a little bit from before, and then the Gemara is going to say that all this kasha that we're talking now is if we compare Porah to Eglah and Eglah to Porah. But the Gemara is going to say that there's another Tana that says everything we learn from Porah itself and from Eglah, so not from comparison. Remember, so there's no kasha. Why here is one thing and here's another thing. We're not learning one from the other. So let's see the Gemara. So the Gemara, Gufa, we went before, Rabbi Yehuda Amirav, Hiniach Oleh Eire Shosakan, if he put on it a bag of sacks, Besula. Ube Eglah, and by the Eglah Rufa, Acha Timshach. In fact, the Gemara Meisvei, steht in Pasuk Oil, Ein Yel Oil. Shara Avodas Minayin, how do we know that other Avodas also passel? Amrit Kavachayma. Uma Eglah Shein Mum Pasuk. Shara Avodas Paisel is born, Porah Shamum Paisel, Ein Adin Shashar Avelas Paisel. That's a Kavachayma. So the Gemara. If you want, I could tell you. Namakan Ol, Venamalahalan Ol, Mailahalan Shara Avodas Paisel Bo, Afkan Shara Avodas Paisel Bo. So the Gemara, Mayim Nafshach, what do you mean if you want, I could tell you? It's like I can tell you another way. B'chi Taima Ikal Lemifrach. Ma'ila Ever she can show him Paisel Bo, Inami Kachim Yechichu Shomum Paisel Bo, and Shonim Dalda, Ve'ein Avodah Paisel by Kachim, Namakan. So then I'll tell you, we'll go the other way. Namakan Ol, V'nama Lahalan Ol, Ma'ila Halan Shar Avodas Pasel, Afkan Shar Avodas. Mokam Shabbos, and you're learning from where you're learning. In other, so now we go learn the other way. Malahalan Ashatimshach Atkan Ashatimshach. That what's the kasha? So the Gemara Tanoi. The truth is, it's a machlekes Tanoi. In other words, not everybody compares Eglah to Porah and Porah to Eglah. Tanoi, the Ika the Maisiglo Me'eglah. There's some people that learn Porah from Eglah, and maybe you have kashas. The Ika the Maisiglo Migufa. And there's some that learn everything from the Porah itself. Not, forget about it, it has nothing to do with Eglah. Migufa the Porah. The Sanya we learn, oil, Shteten Pasuk, oil, Ein Liel, oil, Shara Vedas Minayin. Talmud Asher Le'ol. So the word Asher Mikol Mokum that anything is also. Im came my tamalem all. So if every avodah is puzzle, so why does it say all? So the more was all puzzle ben b'shas avodah ben shalei b'shas avodah. If you just put on a b'shar avodas, other avodah ain't places ela b'shas avodah. In fact, the Gemara v'Eima, why don't we say this is all from in Parah itself? The Eima, why don't we say Asher Ol Aleh Klal, and Ol is a prat. Klal with prat, we have the rule is Eim b'Klal or Mashav b'Prat, Ol in Midachin Olay, and for the Gemara Asher Ribuihu. The word Asher is Marba other things also. And V'Tanya Nami, so this is how we know Parah Migufa. V'Tanya Nami. We also learn Egla, Migufa, Ki Haigab, the same way, Earl, and the Earl, Shara by this Minayan, Tamadlema, Ashali Ubadbo, Mikomok, Im came my Tamadlema, Earl, person, Ben Bishas Aveda, Ben Shlai Bishas Aveda, Shara Aveda, and a person, Bishas Aveda, the aim of say, Ashali Ubadbo, Kal, and all Prat, Kal Prat, and Bekal, Mashu Prat. All in Midachin Alay, and for the Gemara, Asher Ribu, the word Asher is a Ribu. So if you learn the dinim from each one by himself, not from the other, the Mela there's no kasha why one has certain things and another has certain things. So the Gemara, Omer Avavua, boy minei made of Yechanan. Meshichas all bekama. You're saying that the behemoth has to pull the yoke. How far does it have to pull? How much distance does it have to cover? Amalei, he said that kamoli o, according to the size of the o. Is the boy who oka or l'rachba? The o is like a long pole that you put on the side of the behemoth. You want to keep the behemoth in a line. So you put like a long pole between the two behemoths, and this is a whole two behemoths. So does it mean the length of the O or the width of the O? That the Gemara, with the dim before I was told, which is a tefach. In other, the behemoth has to move one tefach with the O in order to pass it. Frag the Gemara, why does he say Meshichas O l'rachba tefach? It's like a redundancy. V'leima tefach. Let him just say the word. He asking how much. The answer is a tefach. So the Gemara, hakam hashmalam shiur the O tefach. If you want to know how thick the wood of the O has to be, it has to be a tefach. L'mayin of kamina, l'mekach hamemka. If somebody sold you an O and it didn't have the wood, the long board is not a tefach wide, then he gypped you. Then you could have charata from the sale. Okay, we'll stop over here.